So just a couple hours ago, my sister Tina and my brother-in-law Gary and my brother Tom, my sister-in-law Tina and I, we gathered at my niece's deathbed. She had passed away after a long struggle with cancer. And together as a family, we blessed her. And I invite you as a family, my family, our family here at St. Andrew, to lift her up in prayer. Her name's Mary. But on to good news. Kathy and Mark came in and they shared with me about good news about a granddaughter. And I have forgotten her name already. What? Hazel? Hazel Jane. Their first granddaughter. Congratulations. Let's give them a big hand. Yay! That's good news. And someone's visiting from somewhere. I forgot. Kim and... Where's Kim? There you are. Kim and Dan. Welcome to St. Andrew. We're better because you're here. Grace is in all of it. Grace is in all of it. From the sadness of saying goodbye to someone, to the joys of a new birth, to welcoming friends into our family. Grace is in it all. Thanks be to God. For the life of the Christian, for those who believe in Jesus Christ, we believe that there is a current of grace that surrounds us. A vortex of grace, if you will, that's constantly bringing us closer into the inner life of the Trinity. Grace is in all of it. But unfortunately, there are times, most of the times in our lives, sometimes we gravitate to the negative, not the death of a person necessarily, but looking at things black and white like the Pharisees and scribes. Too worried about seeing someone who shouldn't be sitting next to Jesus instead of recognizing that the love of God is drawing them closer to Christ. Because grace is in it all. Even that gospel we heard today, the prodigal son. How often do we think of that first and foremost as, that bad guy? He wished his father dead by saying, "Give me my inheritance." And he squandered everything. And even the word prodigal means to lavish something. So he was living lavishly. He was living life to the full, as he thought. But grace was drawing him back. Even in our most sinful state, grace is in all of it. St. Julia of Norwich would say, in the fall and in the recovery, God's in it all. But how many of us thought of that gospel in a way that if the word prodigal means to lavish, overflow, how many of us by default think of the Father? The Father of grace. The Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. The Father who saw His Son at a distance, the grace that was calling Him back, even when He was living that terrible life, that was calling Him back. The Father was watching, because grace is in it all. And when He saw His Son, He embraced Him. He celebrated. He dressed Him with the finest. And they had a meal. The ancient Israelites knew this. They knew it. In that first reading, when the yoke of slavery, that's what the reading was talking about, when the yoke of slavery was taken off the Israelites, they celebrated a meal in remembrance. A Passover meal. To remember what God's goodness did for them, because grace is in it all. That yoke of slavery that was lifted from them, they wanted themselves to remember this always. And our Jewish brothers and sisters still celebrate that Passover meal, remembering the goodness of God that calls us into that inner life. And don't we do the same? Don't we do the same as Catholics? If we go from this place out there and live our lives and only recognize the negative within life, we've missed the boat. We've missed it, folks. We are called to recognize that vortex of grace that is constantly around us, constantly drawing us into the inner life of the Trinity. We are called to recognize it so powerfully that we come here for a meal. We come here to celebrate and to remember what God continues to do for us. The Christ is in all of it. The Christ is in the world. The Christ is in the good and the bad that we can take and we bring to this place. In that vortex of grace that brings us closer and closer to our fullest expression of the Christ. That we will break bread and we will become in communion with our God and with each other. Fortified to go back out and witness to what we believe. Because grace is in it all. Grace is in it all. I love those folks in the 12-step programs. Because one thing they do, it's foundational. They look to their higher power. They look to grace. And they know that grace is drawing them into a better place. I have a dear friend who's been in sobriety now for 25 years. And I'll never forget the first time he looked at me and he said, you know, one of the things I am most grateful for in my life is my alcoholism. I thought, wow. And he was the one that taught me, because grace is in it all. If it wasn't for something that brought him down to his knees, he would have never known and appreciated the mercy of God. St. Julia of Norwich. Celebrate your lives, folks. Bring that grace into the world. And know that God's mercy is in all of it. We have so much to be grateful for in the midst of our sadness, in the midst of our trials. We have so much to be grateful for because grace is in it all. Thanks be to God.